Page 32. They led to more and more, less and less delicate snores, until everyone was snoring except the few who did not know how to snore. They were giggling. Miss Binny clapped her hands and spoke in a voice that was no longer soft, quiet, and sleepy. "All right, boys and girls," she said. "This is enough. We do not snore or giggle during rest time." "Ramona started it," said Howie. Ramona sat up and scowled at Howie. "Tattletale," she said in a voice of scorn. Across Howie she saw that Susan was laying quietly with her beautiful curls spread out on her mat and her eyes screwed tight shut. "Well, you did," said Howie. "Children," Miss Binny's voice was sharp, "we must rest so that we will not be tired when our mothers come to take us home." "Is your mother coming to take you home?" Howie asked Miss Binny. Ramona had been wondering the same thing. "That's enough, Howie." Miss Binny spoke the way mothers sometimes speak just before dinner time. In a moment she was back to her soft, sleepy voice. "I like the way Susan is resting so quietly," she said. "Susan, you may be the wake-up fairy and tap the boys and girls with this wand to wake them up." The magic wand turned out to be nothing but an everyday yardstick. Ramona lay quietly, but her efforts were of no use. Susan, with her curls bouncing about her shoulders, tapped Ramona last. "It's not fair," Ramona thought. She was not the worst rester in the class. Howie was much worse. The rest of the morning went quickly. The class was allowed to explore the paints and the toys, and those who wanted to were allowed to draw with their new crayons. They did not, however, learn to read and write, but Ramona cheered up when Miss Binny explained that everyone who had anything to share with the class could bring it to school the next day for show and tell. Ramona was glad when the bell finally rang and she saw her mother waiting outside the fence. Mrs. Kemp and Willa Jean were waiting for Howie, too, and the five started home together. Right away, Howie said, "Ramona got benched, and she's the worst rester in the class." After all that had happened that morning, Ramona found this too much. "Why don't you shut up?" she yelled at Howie just before she hit him. Mrs. Quimby seized Ramona by the hand and dragged her away from Howie. "Now, Ramona," she said, and her voice was firm, "this is no way to behave on your first day of school." "Poor little girl," said Mrs. Kemp. "She's worn out." Nothing infuriated Ramona more than having a grown-up say, as if she could not hear, that she was worn out. "I'm not worn out," she shrieked. "She got plenty of rest while she was benched," said Howie. "Now, Howie, you stay out of this," said Mrs. Kemp. Then, to change the subject, she asked her son, "How do you like kindergarten?" "Oh, I guess it's all right," said Howie, without enthusiasm. "They don't have any dirt to dig in or tricycles to ride." "And what about you, Ramona?" asked Mrs. Quimby. "Did you like kindergarten?" Ramona considered. Kindergarten had not turned out as she had expected. Still, even though she had not been given a present and Miss Binny did not love her, she liked being with the boys and girls her own age. She liked singing the song about the Donser and having her own little cupboard. "I didn't like it as much as I thought I would," she answered honestly. "But Maybe it'll get better when we have show and tell. Chapter 2, Show and Tell. Ramona looked forward to many things. Her first loose tooth, riding a bicycle instead of a tricycle, wearing lipstick like her mother, but most of all she looked forward to show and tell. For years Ramona had watched her sister Beezus leave for school with a doll, a book, or a pretty leaf to share with her class. She had watched Beezus's friend Henry Huggins carry mysterious, lumpy packages past her house on his way to school. She had listened to Beezus talk about the interesting things her class brought to school: turtles, ballpoint pens that write in 3 different colors, a live clam in a jar of sand and seawater. Now, at last the time had come for Ramona to show and tell. "What are you going to take to show your class?" she asked Beezus, hoping for an idea for herself. "Nothing," said Beezus, and went on to explain. "Along about the 3rd grade, you begin to outgrow show and tell. By the 5th grade, it's all right to take something really unusual, like somebody's pickled appendix or something to do with social studies. An old piece of fur when you study fur traders would be all right. Or if something really exciting happened, like your house burning down, it would be all right to tell about that. But in 5th grade, you don't take an old doll or a toy fire engine to school, and you don't call it show and tell by then. You just let the teacher know you have something interesting." Ramona was not discouraged. She was used to Beezus's growing out of things as she grew into them. She rummaged around in her toy box and finally dragged out her favorite doll, the doll with the hair that could really be washed. "I'm going to take Chevrolet," she told Beezus. "Nobody names a doll Chevrolet," said Beezus, whose dolls had names like Sandra and Patty. "I do," Ramona answered. "I think Chevrolet's the most beautiful name in the world." "Well, she's a horrid-looking doll," said Beezus. "Her hair is green. Besides, you don't play with her." "I wash her hair," said Ramona loyally. "And the only reason what's left of her hair looks sort of green is that I tried to blue it like Howie's grandmother, who has her hair blued at the beauty shop. Mama said putting bluing on yellow hair turned it green. Anyway, I think it's pretty." When the time finally came to start school, Ramona was disappointed once more to see Miss Kemp approaching with Howie and little Willa Jean. "Mama, come on," begged Ramona, dragging at her mother's hand, but her mother waited until the Kemps had caught up. Willa Jean was even sloppier this morning. There were crumbs on the front of her sweater, and she was drinking apple juice out of a nursing bottle. Willa Jean dropped the bottle when she saw Chevrolet and sat there with the apple juice dribbling down her chin while she stared at Ramona's doll. "Ramona is taking her doll to school for show and tell," said Mrs. Quimby. Howie looked worried. "I don't have anything for show and tell," he said. "Oh, that's all right, Howie," said Mrs. Quimby. "Miss Binny doesn't expect you to take something every day." "I want to take something," said Howie. "My goodness, Howie," said his mother. "What if 29 children each brought something? Miss Binny wouldn't have time to teach you anything." "She's taking something," Howie pointed to Ramona. There was something familiar about the way Howie was behaving. Ramona pulled at her hand. "Come on, Mama." "Ramona, I think it would be nice if you ran in the house and found something to lend Howie to take to school, said Mrs. Quimby.